Step by step, freedom vanished, and millions cheered as chains were placed upon them. It sounds like something from a dystopian novel, but this was the reality in Germany in the early 1930s. How does an entire nation fall under the spell of one man? How does a vibrant democracy crumble from within? Today, we're exploring the chillingly methodical process by which Adolf Hitler dismantled German democracy and forged a totalitarian state, and the crucial lessons it holds for all of us. Welcome back to our series. In our last episode, we saw the chaotic political landscape of the Weimar Republic that allowed the Nazi Party to rise. On January 30th, 1933, the unthinkable happened. Adolf Hitler, the leader of a party that had never won an outright majority, was appointed Chancellor of Germany by President Paul von Hindenburg. The conservative elite who helped him into power believed they could control him, use his popular support for their own ends, and then discard him. They saw him as a temporary, useful tool. They couldn't have been more tragically wrong. Hitler had his foot in the door, but he didn't have absolute power, not yet. He needed a crisis, a national emergency that would allow him to seize control. He didn't have to wait long. Less than a month after he became chancellor, on the night of February 27, 1933, the Reichstag building, the very heart of German democracy, went up in flames. A young Dutch communist named Marinus van der Lubbe was found at the scene and arrested. To this day, historians debate whether he acted alone or if the Nazis had a hand in starting the fire. But honestly, it didn't matter. Hitler had his pretext. He immediately declared the fire a sign of a massive communist plot to overthrow the state. The next day, he convinced the elderly and ailing President Hindenburg to sign the Reichstag Fire Decree. Its official title was the Decree for the Protection of People and State. Think about that name. It sounds protective, doesn't it? But what it actually did was catastrophic for freedom. It suspended basic civil liberties guaranteed by the Weimar Constitution: freedom of speech, freedom of the press, the right to assemble, and privacy of communication. The police could now arrest and detain people indefinitely without charge. It was the legal foundation for a police state, passed in a single day, all under the guise of security. Thousands of communists, socialists, and other political opponents were rounded up and thrown into makeshift concentration camps. The Nazi Party's main rivals were effectively eliminated just weeks before a new election was scheduled for March. Despite this campaign of terror and intimidation, the Nazis still failed to win an absolute majority in the March 1933 election. They got 43.9% of the vote. It was a strong showing, but not the total mandate Hitler craved. He knew he couldn't rely on elections alone. He needed a way to bypass the democratic process entirely. He needed the Enabling Act. The official name of this law was the Law to Remedy the Distress of People and Reich. Again, notice the language. Remedy the distress. It sounds helpful. What it actually did was give Hitler's cabinet the power to pass laws without the involvement of the Reichstag for 4 years. In essence, it was a law to end all laws. It would make Hitler a legal dictator. To pass it, he needed a 2/3 majority in parliament. With his communist opponents arrested or in hiding, he turned his attention to the other parties. On March 23, 1933, the Reichstag convened in the Kroll Opera House, with the burned-out shell of their old parliament building serving as a grim backdrop. The building was surrounded by armed SA and SS men. Inside, Hitler delivered a speech that was a masterclass in manipulation. He offered false promises to the Catholic Center Party, assuring them he would respect the rights of the Church. He dangled the carrot of stability and national renewal while the stick of violent intimidation was visible just outside the doors. Fearing the consequences of voting no and perhaps hoping for the best, the Center Party and other conservative groups caved. The Enabling Act passed. Only the Social Democrats, showing immense courage, voted against it. Democracy in Germany was now officially dead. With the Enabling Act in hand, the Nazis began a process they called Gleichschaltung, or coordination. It was a systematic takeover of every aspect of German society. Trade unions were abolished, their leaders arrested, and all workers were forced into a new German labor front. All other political parties were either banned or forced to dissolve. By July 1933, Germany was a one-party state. State governments were dissolved and replaced with Nazi governors. The independent press was shut down, and radio, film, and the arts all came under the control of Joseph Goebbels' new Ministry of Propaganda. But to maintain power, you need more than just laws and propaganda. You need fear. This is where the terror apparatus of the Nazi state came into its own. The SS, or Schutzstaffel, which started as Hitler's personal bodyguard unit, transformed under the leadership of Heinrich Himmler into a massive organization, a state within a state. The SS was the ideological core of the regime. Alongside them was the Gestapo, the secret state police. The Gestapo's power was immense. They could arrest citizens on suspicion, imprison them without trial, and torture them. What's truly terrifying is that the Gestapo was never a massive organization. In a city of millions like Berlin, there were only a few hundred officers. Their real power came from the fact that ordinary Germans became their eyes and ears. People would report on their neighbors, their colleagues, even their own family members for telling a joke about Hitler or listening to a foreign radio station. A culture of suspicion and fear seeped into the very fabric of daily life. This gradual normalization of fear is one of the most insidious aspects of totalitarianism. At first, you're afraid to speak out. Then you're afraid to have the wrong thoughts. Soon, the safest thing to do is to actively participate, to cheer the loudest, just to prove you're on the right side. And there was so much to cheer for, according to the propaganda. By Providence to rescue Germany from humiliation and despair. This was the cult of personality. Goebbels' propaganda machine worked tirelessly to build this image. Hitler's portrait was everywhere. His speeches, broadcast on the radio into every town, square, and home, portrayed him as a man of the people, yet also a transcendent, almost superhuman figure. He promised to restore national pride, to put people back to work, to make Germany strong again. And in some ways, he delivered. Massive public works projects, like the construction of the Autobahn, did reduce unemployment. Rearmament stimulated the economy. For many Germans who had suffered through the Great Depression and the perceived weakness of the Weimar Republic, it felt like a national revival. They saw order instead of chaos. They saw employment instead of poverty. They saw national strength instead of humiliation. The price for this was their freedom, but it was a price many seemed willing, even eager, to pay. They traded liberty for security, democracy for the promise of a strong leader who would solve all their problems. They gave up their right to choose in exchange for being told what to do. This brings us to the most uncomfortable lesson of this entire period. Democracies don't always die from a foreign invasion or a violent coup. Sometimes they are dismantled piece by piece from the inside, often with the consent, or at least the apathy, of a significant portion of the population. The fall of the Weimar Republic shows how fragile democratic institutions are when people lose faith in them. It's a stark warning about what can happen when citizens, worn down by crisis and yearning for simple solutions, give up their freedoms for the illusion of security and the promises of a charismatic leader. The story of Germany in 1933 is not just about the evil of a few men at the top. It's about the choices and failures of millions of ordinary people who allowed it to happen. Understanding this process is not about judging the past from the comfort of our present. It's about learning to recognize the warning signs in our own time. It's about valuing our democratic processes, even when they're messy and slow. It's about being wary of leaders who promise to fix everything if we just give them more power. Because as Germany learned in the darkest of ways, once freedom is given away, getting it back can be nearly impossible. Thank you so much for watching. This is a heavy but incredibly important topic, and I appreciate you joining me for this discussion. If you found this video insightful, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into history. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next episode, where we'll explore the dark heart of Nazi ideology and the path to war. See you next time.